Representative for the 41st District, representing the Naperville area. And I want to thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for your support. We're here today because of the murders of 8 people in the Atlanta area on Tuesday night. 6 of those people killed were women of Asian descent. And these acts of violence come amid escalating tensions, escalating hate throughout this past year since the COVID-19 pandemic. Let me tell you, our community, your friends, your neighbors, your family, we are reeling from this. In a year when every single one of us has had to deal with increasing isolation, increasing deaths, we in our community, we have had to proceed more carefully, more fearfully, as we've had to watch leadership from the highest levels of our country use pointed and deliberate words of hate to put targets on us, hateful words and hateful language. And let me tell you, these acts of racism, they're not new, and they're things that our community has had to deal with already, often with state-sanctioned acts of racism, from the Chinese Exclusion Act to the internment of Japanese Americans. Our community is just too used to being used as scapegoats, to being subject to these moments of being considered outsiders, perpetual foreigners in a country where we have been here for generation after generation. So these sentiments, they're not new, but they don't have to continue. I am so proud to be with the Asian American Caucus, and we know that understanding these acts of hate that have happened in the past, these crimes of the past, we know that understanding them and knowing about them is the key to making sure they don't happen in the future. And that understanding happens with education. And I'm so proud that the day after these murders happened, the House Education and Curriculum Committee, we passed, with the leadership of State Representative Jennifer Gershowitz and State Representative Ram Villavalam, the TEACH Act. The Teaching Equitable Asian American Community History Act will make sure that every school in Illinois, that every student in Illinois learns about Asian Americans and their history, and will learn about the moments of darkness, the moments of racism, as well as those moments of joy and achievement. And I am so looking forward to having the full support of the General Assembly behind us in passing this bill. I'm looking forward to standing with our governor when he signs this bill into law. But we also know that this isn't enough, and we won't just stop here. We know that these acts of racism, these acts of hate, that they're real, that they're dangerous, and we can't combat them alone. The Asian American Caucus has stood with our Black community. We have stood against anti-Black hate, and now we need all of you to stand with us. We need every single race, ethnicity, background to be with us, because we know that unless we are all united against hate in all its form, that we'll never be truly free from this hate and the violence that ensues. And that's why I'm so proud to stand here today, to stand with the Asian American Caucus, the Asian American AAPI community, with Governor J.B. Pritzker. Governor Pritzker, thank you so much for your support. Thank you for this platform. We know that we have no better ally, no better partner than we have in you in making sure that our community moves forward.
Thank you very much, Representative. Well, thank you very much, Representative. I want to thank everyone for joining us here today, and I very much appreciate the fact that so many people have, particularly in the last few days, shared their stories with me and in public, so that others can hear about the challenges that are facing the AAPI community. As the nation grieves with family members of the victims in Atlanta, I'm here today to stand in solidarity with members of the Asian American, and Pacific Islander communities here in Illinois. We must recognize that to truly address the roots of hate and prejudice, that work begins at home. I want to thank those who are here with me today for sharing their stories, and those of their constituents, their family and friends. Representatives Janet Yang Rohr, Representative Denise Wang Stoneback, and Representative Theresa Ma, one of the leaders and first members of this, early members of this caucus, Julia Ting, the Chicago chapter leader of the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum, Josina Morita, Commissioner of the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, McLean County Board Member Sharon Chung, thank you for driving all this way to join us today in this press conference, and Eva Ni, the lead organizer of the Coalition for a Better Chinese American Community. The sickening murders that took place in Atlanta last week fueled a national outcry over racism and prejudice against the Asian American community. And such a poignant example of violent, racialized misogyny should serve as a call to action. Make no mistake, the state of Illinois recognizes that this was not an isolated incident. It was a year where the Asian American, and Pacific Islander communities experienced racist scapegoating for the COVID-19 pandemic. A year in which advocacy groups documented a surge in anti-Asian hate incidents, particularly against women. It was a year in which the occupant of the highest office in the land fueled the fire with his own hateful rhetoric. This is a moment when every American should take time to reflect on what they've done and what more they can do to stand up against bigotry, hatred, and intolerance. Of course, we would be remiss to pretend that this is only a problem of the last year. I love the promise of this country, and we must work every day to attain that promise. But there's still so much work to be done. Today, we need patriots to stand up against hatred. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The truest patriots are those intent on working to hold this nation accountable to its ideals. Here in Illinois, there is no place for racism or discrimination of any kind. Representatives of our state government have already been in touch with municipal leaders across Illinois to spread awareness of the events in Atlanta, encouraging them to proactively protect their residents. My administration is working to combat hate and hold those who deploy it accountable. Under my governorship, the Department of Human Rights has restarted the Commission on Discrimination and Hate Crimes, and 3 of its members representing the AAPI community, Delara Saeed, Anita Banerjee, and Andy Kang. Like Attorney General Kwame Raoul, I want to encourage people to call and report discrimination or hate-motivated incidents to his office online, by email, or through the Civil Rights Hotline. That's 1-877-581-3692. I'm going to repeat that. This is the Civil Rights Hotline. Please report hate-motivated incidents or discrimination at 1-877-581-3692. I do not pretend to know the pain of this moment for those who look at the Atlanta victims and see their own mothers, daughters, and sisters, or themselves. But I want the AAPI community in Illinois to know that I see you, and I see the fear and anxiety that these events have forced into your lives and the lives of your loved ones. And I want you to know that Illinois is your home. You are our friends and our neighbors and our family members, and I will do everything in my power as governor to protect you and to welcome you. Thank you, and now it's my distinct honor to introduce Eva Ni, who is a lead organizer at the Coalition for a Better Chinese American Community. Eva?
Hello. Thank you to the Governor and the Asian American Caucus for holding this space to stand with the Asian American community. My name is Eva Ni, and I'm the lead organizer at Coalition for a Better Chinese American Community, a civic engagement nonprofit right here in Chicago's Chinatown. Like many other Asians across the nation, the tragedies in Atlanta hit my heart deeply because this was personal. This could have been any of our mothers. Like many other Asian immigrants here, my mother worked hard in spas in San Francisco, which gave me the future and my sister to be able to be successful. So many immigrant moms, which include single working mothers, work tirelessly every day simply to survive and to provide for their families. The victims in Atlanta are no exception. Like many other Asian women, throughout my entire life, I've been catcalled, fetishized, and silenced. We are scrutinized and our stories rewritten by mainstream media. Again, the victims in Atlanta are no exception. Reducing Asians to stereotypes such as the model minority myth, yellow peril, and the dragon lady dismisses our struggles and treats us like foreigners and creates orientalized sexual fantasies for all of us. And now, 6 Asian women have lost their lives. I want to emphasize that the killings in Atlanta are not random nor a one-time event. Years of misogyny, oppression, and white supremacy have led to this atrocity and continues to happen every day. Remember, this does not end in a couple of weeks, months, or years. We need to take action, which takes dedicated effort, vulnerability, and time. I ask you to support the victims, families, and communities. Remember that these victims are not sensations. They are leaving behind devastated families and loved ones. Take their whole stories to heart. Also, learn about the history of Asian Americans and discrimination in the United States. As we know, discrimination and racism is not new, from the Chinese Exclusion Act to Vincent Chin to now. Learn our stories and hear our struggles. Also, take time to learn about the years of Asian American organizing that allows us to be here today, such as the Civil Rights Movement with Asian Black Solidarity and the Farm Labor Movement with Asian Latinx Solidarity. Lastly, show up for all people of color, in addition to Asian Americans. Remember that racism is a system upheld by white supremacy. It has been ingrained in our society for generations. We need to dismantle it together because Asian Americans are not free until all of us are free. Thank you. And now we'll hear from Julia Ting at NAPOF.
Thank you, Governor Pritzker and the Asian American Caucus for inviting me to speak here today. My name is Julia Ting. My Chinese name is Ding Shu Yin. I am a Chicago chapter leader with NAPOF, the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum. I am first generation Chinese American. When I first found out about the Atlanta shootings, I was sitting in bed about to go to sleep. When I learned that 6 of the 8 people killed were Asian women, my heart pounded as I read the sentence over and over again, my brain not wanting to fully process the words. I felt my hands shaking, pressure building in my chest as I scrolled through countless articles that centered and made excuses for the killer. I couldn't find even one article that named the racist, misogynistic, classist violence for what it was. I cried out of devastation and out of anger. The killer had targeted such a marginalized group of people, one that society routinely treats as invisible, working-class Asian women. But even as the victims of this atrocity, it still seemed like they did not matter. My heart hurt. It hurt then, and it hurts now. My heart hurts for these women who were just trying to exist in the world and make a living when they were murdered at their workplace. My heart hurts for Asian women across the country, and especially for those working in service industries. My heart hurts for my elders who can't even go grocery shopping without fear of violence. I am scared for them all, and I'm scared for myself. There has been a lot of pressure to designate this as a hate crime. Hate crime is a very specific legal designation, and our priority at NAPOF is the recognition that this crime was motivated by the intersections of racism, classism, and sexism, and that the response should address these root issues. Anti-Asian hate and violence disproportionately impacts women. More than 68% of reported incidents of anti-Asian harassment and violence have been from women. new polling commissioned by NAPOF has revealed that nearly half of the AAPI women respondents had been affected by anti-Asian racism in the past 2 years. But this comes as no surprise. Even before the pandemic and the racist scapegoating that came in its wake, AAPI women routinely experienced racialized misogyny. I've lost count of the times that I've been catcalled with a racial slur, reduced down to stereotypes of docility and submissiveness, and seen not as a person, but as an exotic sexual object. After hearing about the attack, I had the thought that I no longer wanted to exist in my body. I looked in the mirror and wished that I could trade out my face for another, for one that makes me less of a target for the sexualization that too often comes with violence. But I am not what is wrong, and it is not Asian women who are wrong. We are not the ones that need to change. In response to the attack, there have been calls for increased police presence in Chicago areas with large AAPI populations. This prospect is honestly terrifying. When I see a police officer on the street, my body's first reaction is to tense up. I hold my breath as I walk past them, relaxing only when there is enough distance between us. The spokesperson of the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office in Georgia proudly took a picture of his anti-Asian shirt almost a year ago, but still maintains the power that comes with his position and used it to claim that the killer was just having a bad day. He is not an anomaly. The police have a long history of violence against communities of color and notably against massage workers through police brutality, racial profiling, surveillance, and the raids that they conduct. We will not take solutions at the expense of Black and brown bodies. I also call on our legislators to do more than just condemn Tuesday's massacre. Words alone are empty. We need real actions and policy changes that will actually improve our safety, and especially the safety of the communities that experience the most harm. Women and elders. This looks like true aid to our families, community support, government support, and an emphasis on our lived experience so that aid flows to those who need it the most. Decriminalize our existence and survival as immigrants, workers, and women in this country. Our community has come together in incredible ways, but we can only support each other so much. Our government and laws must support us as well. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce Representative Ma.
Good morning. I'm State Representative Theresa Ma. I represent the 2nd House District in the Illinois General Assembly. That's a district that includes Chinatown and where the population of Asian Americans makes up about 25% of the entire district. I want to thank Governor Pritzker for being here this morning to show his support and solidarity for our communities. It means a great deal to me and my constituents as we remember that he was here last February, a little more than a year ago, before the shutdown, to allay people's fears about coming to Chinatown. It's been a challenging year, a year in which members of the Asian American community have seen heightened xenophobia. In Chinatown, businesses felt the effects of this xenophobia and racism well before the pandemic began, and many of the businesses are still struggling. I think it's important to recognize the history of how Chinatown here was established as business leaders over 110 years ago moved the Chinatown originally from the Loop area where they experienced violence and hostility. It's unacceptable that more than 100 years later, racism and hate are still issues for our community. It means we truly appreciate having the governor here to stand with us and to shed light on this issue and to bring about more equity and justice in our state and to make it a more welcoming state for all. And now it's my pleasure to welcome the governor back up here for questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Ma. And happy to take any questions from members of the media. Thank you.